everyone, to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Friday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Busy day around these parts. Already out is the Rider Happy Hour, looking at the Saskatchewan Roughriders as they get ready for a weekend game against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Coming up now, we will look at the Stanley Cup Final, the NBA Finals, and then it's a Football Friday looking at the Thursday game and a preview of what's coming up in the Canadian Football League. And then it is also a Fightin' Friday. We'll have part 2 of this podcast looking at the WWE and a big boxing weekend. So a lot to get to. Let's get into it with the Stanley Cup Finals that feel final. So, that didn't go the way the Edmonton Oilers thought it would, as they are now down 3-0 in the Stanley Cup Finals, following a 4-3 loss at the hands of the Florida Panthers. And I was on Game Over Edmonton last night, and I am still kind of figuring this game out, because on the one hand, Edmonton did not deserve to win that game based off of the stretch they had in that second period, giving up 3 goals in 6:20 and falling behind 4-1, and the lack of execution that they had and some of the mistakes that they made that led to those goals. On the other hand, I don't know if they deserve to be down 3-0. I feel like they have outplayed Florida in back-to-back game, or not in back-to-back games, sorry. Florida soundly pounced them in game 2. But in game 1 and game 3, I feel like Edmonton was probably the better team. Now, I'm not going to say they deserve to have won both of those, but Edmonton, I think, probably deserves a better fate right now than being down 2-1 in this series. And I think there are some positives to take away from this game, but there are certainly some negatives as well. On the blue line, that was simply not good enough last night from Edmonton. Darnell Nurse with an absolutely brutal giveaway. And then Bouchard gets his lunch money stolen from him by Barkov. Skinner with a bad turnover back behind his net. And those are mistakes you can make when you're playing Columbus in January. When the Stanley Cup is on the line, those are things that can't be happening. And they're happening to the Oilers at the worst time. And so, let's break those down individually. Darnell Nurse. Haters will say he's hurt. A lot of people would suggest that he is banged up. And this has always been my problem with this time of year, where it's like, okay, well, this guy, like, yeah, he's struggling, he's not doing well. You know what it is? He's hurt. Look, if he is hurt to the point where Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk's forecheck leads to that turnover, then he shouldn't be playing. Elias Pettersson, he's not doing anything because he's hurt. Well, get someone in there who will do something. Like, I can't stand this mentality that, oh, well, he's hurt, so we have to play him. If that is what you are doing out on the ice, I don't care if you're hurt or whatever, you have to go. And I don't get the reluctance of not, the guy, yeah, he's got 2 broken legs, but he's a warrior, he's going to tough it out. It's like, don't let him. There must be a defensive option that is better than whatever Darnell Nurse provided for the Edmonton Oilers last night. And the fact that they have continued to roll out Nurse and Ceci is mind-boggling to me. And then you have the other top defensive pairing that has been their top defensive pairing for the entirety of the postseason so far. And Bouchard, this is back-to-back games where I think a couple of the goals are on him. And I remember I was on 960 out here in Calgary and talking with Spectre, and he was like, I think Bouchard has turned into a number 1 defenseman. Those conversations have certainly shut the hell up over the last little bit, because the negatives in this series have outweighed the positives. And there are so many positives in this kid's game, and he is going to be very, very good. But you look at the bad turnover against Rodriguez. He gets beat along the wall by Lundell to set up the Rodriguez second goal in game 2. And then last night, Barkov gets the steal from him. And then Barkov just bullies him for about 100 feet up the ice before he sets up the pass for the goal. And then you have 2 guys that he's deciding on. His defensive partner isn't back. He goes to make the aggressive play, pushing up to get Rodriguez. That leaves one of the best players in the National Hockey League, Barkov, right behind you. Wide open for a breakaway. Simply, again, cannot happen at this time of year, at this level, when the dude at the other end of the ice, in Bobrovsky, is playing his bag off right now, and you, inexplicably scored 3 goals on him when it seemed like you may not even get that the whole series, and you still lose. So that has to be so demoralizing from an Edmonton standpoint, and it's something that has been talked about for forever. And this is the new message I'm going to have going into next deadline. Overbuy. If you are one of these teams that is getting ready for a run to the Stanley Cup playoffs, overdo it with depth. Because we have seen injury after injury, especially on blue lines, man. We have seen injury after injury really beat some things up. And so I think when you are looking at, like, out in Calgary, like a Dennis Gilbert. I'm not saying a Dennis Gilbert would come in and save the season right now and you need to scratch Bouchard. But if you had him, maybe you feel a bit more comfortable about not playing Cody Ceci so goddamn much. Or maybe Darnell Nurse's injuries are a bit too much to overcome. Or in the Dallas series, like the injury situation they had. If you lose, like, Dallas losing Heiskanen would have just been devastating, right? And same thing Hughes. Like, there are certain players that are irreplaceable. If Connor McDavid goes down in this game, they're not going to be saying, oh, thank God we have Adam Henrique now. There are some players that are just irreplaceable. But building up that depth, that organizational depth, I think is so important going into these playoffs now when you see the type of grind that it is for a couple of months. The last mistake there that we talked about was Stuart Skinner. That was a brutal giveaway, and based on the story and all of that, and I said this on Game Over last night too, I have given him the benefit of the doubt on a few of these, but that is a play that, again, just simply cannot be made in those types of situations, and to have all of that compounding on itself is really frustrating. Like I said, though, there are some positives from an Edmonton standpoint. McDavid was exceptional last night, and I said on Game Over, like, he's the best player in the league, and he's leveled up. Like, he made plays that literally only he could make, keeping the puck alive, working the retrieval game, allowing McLeod and Broberg to get their goals last night. Again, cannot stress enough how good he played and how effective he was. Even not getting on the score sheet, but just a phenomenal game from him. They're getting some depth scoring. Fogle gets a goal. McLeod gets a goal. Broberg gets a goal. You had Ekholm in game 1. So a few guys are actually stepping up and having moments now. And like I said, I think Edmonton played pretty well in this game. They just can't beat Bobrovsky. And it's something I said before. They have not done a good enough job of creating havoc in front of Bobrovsky. And you see last night, how did 2 of those pucks go in? You get one that Broberg shoots it off a dude's elbow and it bounces into the goal. Chaos in front of the net. How does the McLeod one go in? There's like 9 dudes standing in front. Chaos in front of the net. That is how Edmonton is going to win this game and get back into this series, is chaos in front of Sergei Bobrovsky. It feels bleak because it's bleak, right? Like, that there is no sugarcoating it. The Edmonton Oilers are probably going to lose in the Stanley Cup Final here. Like, just math would suggest 3-0 doesn't happen a whole lot. If anyone can do it, it would be McDavid. And if any team was going to do it, it would be the team that outplayed the other guys in 2 of 3 so far this series. But I don't know, man. Like, it just, that building got really quiet really quick. And it's what we talked about, how Edmonton needed that hot start. They then needed to capitalize on it, and they didn't necessarily. So we'll see. From a Florida standpoint, he led in 3, but Bobrovsky, again, was exceptional. Like, that play where McDavid is circling around and he's staying tight to his post because he knows McDavid could, like Doug Gilmour, it stomp up and try to tuck it in short side. And he sends it out in front, and McLeod is there with 75% of the net just open to him. And Bobrovsky goes splits and stops that. If Florida does eventually go on to win this, which again, math would suggest they will, that needs to be a statue outside the arena. Like, that is the moment the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup, in my opinion. Because if they make it 4-4 there, Edmonton just wins this hockey game. With that kind of momentum, that kind of a comeback, the building shaking the way it is, like, that building would have rocked apart if they would have been able to get that goal and tied it up. So I do think, again, major stick tap to Sergei Bobrovsky, and Barkov was tremendous again. And we talked about him before in his importance in every facet of the game, and you saw it last night. He was the best player on the ice most of the time last night, and the boost that he gives them on both ends of the ice is just incredible. And he's not going to win the Conn Smythe because Bobrovsky is definitely going to, but this has been a leveling up series for him. And I think from Florida's standpoint, you're looking at it, and I think Tkachuk played a good hockey game last night, but we haven't seen a Matthew Tkachuk has entered the group chat type of a game. He has been there, but it's been a bit more on the peripherals. And last night, you saw it again. He does get a play that leads to a Sam Bennett goal, but those two guys haven't been factors in the same way they were against the Rangers and in series previous. They just kind of are there. And they're causing problems, but they haven't had their big step-up game yet. And so if I'm Florida, I'm like, look, we need one good game from Tkachuk. We can get that. Defensively, they played a really good game again. I'm saying Edmonton needs to cause more havoc in front of Sergei Bobrovsky. The reason I'm saying that is because Florida has kept them from doing that. And they've been a few more defensive miscues in this game. I thought Ekman Larsson actually had kind of a bad game and had a couple of turnovers there. But Forsling, again, is tremendous. And Ekblad has been really good with him along the way. But this is... It feels like it's done. We'll see if Florida can finish it off coming up this weekend when they take on the Oilers again in Edmonton. Let's shift gears now and talk some basketball as the NBA Finals could be done tonight. The Boston Celtics have a chance to wrap up their record 18th championship tonight as they take on the Dallas Mavericks in Game 4 of the NBA Finals. We went over Game 3 in the last one. So, what needs to happen for these teams to be successful tonight? For Boston, it's kind of keep on keeping on. What I think absolutely needs to happen is a better fourth quarter. If they have an opportunity to put the Mavericks away, put them away. Because I do think with the desperation of your season coming to an end, on your home court, I don't think it'll be as easy to put them away with kind of your B or C level effort in this one. And so that is where it comes down to me, from a Boston standpoint. That shot making still needs to be there, because that's been a problem for them this series. I think it will be. It just, you can't take your foot off the gas the way that they have throughout the entirety of this postseason, and now into this one here, where they have a chance to wrap things up going 16-2 and 80-20 for the season, which is a really, really remarkable run when you think about it. Otherwise, there isn't a whole lot. They did kind of get best case scenario out of a few guys last game, but they've had it for a bit with White and with Holiday. Brown continues to level up, as we've talked about all finals long, and Tatum actually had the really good Tatum game last night, or the other night, sorry, and I would anticipate that continuing. Obviously, a lot of the onus is on the Dallas side. What needs to get better? For the first time in this series, we're saying Luka needs to get better, and a lot of the conversation around Luka has been really frustrating over the past 48 hours or so, because it is one thing to say he cost them that game. It is another to say that he is a loser and you can't win with him. And this has always been my thing in these types of moments when it comes to sports talk, where you'll have it in the 19th inning, a guy will hit a home run. Well, you know what that is? It's clutch. If he was clutch, why didn't he do it in the 15th? His clutchness only clicks in the 19th, and it's the same thing with this guy can't win the big one. They did it with Peyton Manning after he won a Super Bowl. It's how many big ones can you win before you have won the big one? Because it seems like he won it, but he has to do it again for some reason. And then he did on a team that he didn't necessarily deserve to win it on, but the team was really good. But neither here nor there. They're doing it with Luka now, where it's oh, you know what? Just can't win with that guy. Motherfucker, you did a lot of winning with that guy, right? You won the first round, and then the second round, and then the third round against a team that everyone thought was going to come in there and just kick the shit out of them. You went in there and won. He has got this team to the NBA Finals. And so you can say, because we're watching right now in just this vacuum of these 4 to 7 games, probably 4, and you're watching it just in this vacuum, and you're like, oh, well, He's not playing winning basketball here, so you can't win with him. And people who have only been watching for the past couple of weeks are like, oh yeah, maybe you can win with this guy. You just won. They won the Western Conference Final. They got to this point. And I understand there is a difference between making it to the NBA Finals and winning in the NBA Finals. And the Boston Celtics have figured that out. And I have been critical of the Boston Celtics along the way. And kudos to them for the level of ass kickery that they have provided here. But because you are not winning when there are but 2 teams left, doesn't mean you can't win with this guy. It actually means almost exactly the opposite, is that you can win with this guy, but maybe this guy needs help when you're facing the best team in the league and probably the best team we've had in the last 5 years. So, pardon me if I'm not going to say, oh yeah, trade Luka for a second, because the way people are talking about him the last couple of days has been insane. He is still, at worst, the 3rd best player in the NBA. At worst. And that is, I think, giving a whole lot of credit to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and maybe projecting a little bit forward. But still, he is at worst the 3rd best player in the league. And the conversation around him has been absolutely insane. But still needs to be better. He had a bad game 3. And the fouls were inexcusable, but his offensive execution wasn't where it normally is for him either. And so that needs to improve tonight. You need another good Kyrie game. And they had it in game 3, and they kind of wasted it. One player who I think really needs to step up for Dallas in this game is PJ Washington. He has been a 0 throughout these finals. And he was such an important part of what they did in beating the shit out of the Minnesota Timberwolves in the Western Conference Final. He needs to find that again here in game 4. Because it seems like they kind of got lively back to where he was before, and even Gafford has been contributing, but PJ Washington has been completely erased from this series. And we talk about players needing to help Luka, they are going to need Washington to help Luka in that spot. So we'll see. I think Dallas gets it done tonight, and then I think it wraps up when we head back to Boston for game 5. So that is the story from the NHL and the NBA. Let's talk some CFL as we get into a Football Friday. All right, week 2 in the Canadian Football League, kicking off last night. It was the Ottawa REDBLACKS with what some would consider an upset win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and there are a lot of takeaways from this game. We will start with Winnipeg, who are now 0-2 and have not looked good throughout. Zach Collaros, I'm not saying it's time to push the panic button, but I'm saying you're at least opening the glass to get to it, because he has not looked good at all. He had 2 good throws in this game, that deep corner and then the deep shot as well to the new guy. Apologies, I'm forgetting his name at this exact moment, but he had exactly 2 good throws in this game. And now in this one, and I think you can make a fairly compelling argument in the Montreal game as well, the offensive line has let him down. And it's kind of the point that the Stampeders got to a little bit, where for a bit in Calgary, and actually for a long time in Calgary, it was next man up, next man up, next man up. Like, all right, this guy's out, we'll bring this guy in. This guy's out, this guy's in. This guy's out, all right, we got a defensive lineman playing O-line, don't care, he's in there as well. This guy is injured, all right, let's bring in Tavares Daniels. Who's he? Never heard of him. 1,000-yard receiver, one of the best players in the league. They constantly were able to replace, and they would lose players, and they wouldn't spend big in free agency, and we'd all be asking what the hell is going on, and then there would be a guy coming out of Toledo that we had never heard of before, and he's just the best offensive lineman in the league. Like, they did that, and for a little bit now, Winnipeg has relied on, it hasn't necessarily been next man up, they've been able to keep this core together, but the core is getting older, and they also dealt with a loss. Hardrick leaves to Saskatchewan, and the Bombers now haven't been able to replace it. And I don't know if it is Zach Collaros being, like, just having hit a wall, if he is cooked, if this offensive line is going to be a problem. It doesn't matter what the problem is, it's a problem in Winnipeg. The offensive execution is not where it needs to be for this team to have anything that resembles competent offense right now. Defensively, I thought they played all right. Like they got some pretty good pressure on Brown. He was able to escape the pocket and create a little bit, but we'll see. I apologies, I didn't see the status of Haba coming off of that injury. It didn't look great, but you had Willie Jefferson come up with a big game again and a couple of key stops, but not enough. Yeah, Winnipeg looks like they're in trouble. And again, I'm not saying it's done, but I'm just saying, like, we all expect dynasties to just, like, fade out gradually and maybe have like one big story flourish and then everyone goes off and retires. Generally not how that works. Sometimes it kind of just hits a wall and it falls flat. And again, I'm not saying that's what happened in Winnipeg. They were without their number one running back in Oliveira, and I think you really noticed that last night. Augustine is good, but he's good in a I'm going to get what's blocked for me sort of way. And Oliveira is good in a I'm going to run through everyone and get 8 yards sort of a way. And so they need more from the running back spot there going forward. On the Ottawa side, I was so impressed with Drew Brown, and I have been beating that drum all offseason, and so maybe there is a bit of confirmation bias on my part. I thought he looked good. A couple throws that were inaccurate, and that is the next part of his game that I think needs to come around. There was a couple of passes that just went straight into the dirt. There was a couple of passes that I think needed to be on the left shoulder that were on the right shoulder, but I think that will come in time, and not staring your receivers down also would help. But the arm talent, kind of cliche to say that, but the arm talent is crazy. The athleticism, the escapability is really, really good. And I thought he spread the ball around quite well. They needed to get Rhymes going a little bit earlier, I think. But there are some weapons there. Like Ackland looked good. Armstrong looked good. Like I said before, there's something brewing out in Ottawa, and that pass rush was relentless on Winnipeg. And now, as we've discussed, maybe that is Winnipeg's offensive line looking a little leaky. So I don't know if we're going to say, oh yeah, this is actually a defensive juggernaut, but they have some very talented players on that team, and they were able to kind of get things going. They still were exposed deep in the secondary a couple of times for a couple of big plays that allowed Winnipeg into this game. But overall, I think some really good signs of life out in Ottawa. Okay, let's get into now the picks for week 2 in the CFL. We will start with it is the Alouettes taking on the Elks. It's a tough spot for Edmonton, who I thought actually played quite well against Saskatchewan, but I don't think they're on the Montreal level. They did make mistakes against Saskatchewan, and it cost them, and I think Montreal can really expose those mistakes as they are the best team in the league. We'll see what Montreal's defense looks like without Stubblefield. Can they keep up that dominant performance against the Bombers? I think they can. I think they come up with a pretty convincing win here against Edmonton. Like I said, I don't think this means Edmonton's a bad football team. I think Edmonton's a fine team. I just think this is a tough schedule to start with an improved Saskatchewan team and now the defending Grey Cup champions. I think Montreal wins this one going away. Stamps against the BC Lions. I am not high on the Stampeders at all. They get a bit of a scare against Hamilton last week after controlling much of the game, but this is a much more difficult test. I'm interested to see how Calgary's defense stacks up in this game. I think Hamilton struggles for 3 quarters were more on Saskatchewan not being great, on Hamilton not being great than Calgary being awesome. But I do think Calgary, the strength of this team is the defense. When we did the Difference Makers episode at the beginning of the season, it was Calgary's defense that showed up a lot more than the offense did. And so I do think this is a good defense. How do you handle Vernon Adams and Stanback and this receiving core? I'm interested to see how they handle that test. On the BC side, this defense needs a bounce back. They were carved up by Dukes in Toronto last week. How do they respond with a Calgary team that is not an offensive juggernaut, I think, by any stretch of the imagination? So how do they respond in that type of a situation? I'll be very curious to see that. And then offensively, we'll see. Like it looked all right, but it did look like there was maybe a piece or two missing from BC's offense. We'll see if they can correct that. I think BC's just a better football team. I think they beat Calgary in this spot. And then Saskatchewan taking on Hamilton. I did a much more in-depth breakdown of this game on the Rider Happy Hour. You can check that wherever you're consuming this. If it's on YouTube, there's a playlist. And if it's in podcast form, it's in this podcast feed. But just to give you the Cole's notes, Saskatchewan's offense has some success late against the Elks. They have 4 weapons in the pass game that I think you need to account for, with Stearns being a really good second down option. Schaefer Baker is just a beast. And you have Emelis and Bain who can provide some real reliable contributions to this offense. Ouellette was quiet. I'll be interested to see if Saskatchewan can get that going in week 2 here against Hamilton. On the Ticats, the defense did not impress me a whole lot against the Calgary offense that I view as rather pedestrian. I think Saskatchewan's offense is better than Calgary's, so I think that's going to be a problem. And we'll see if Hamilton's offense can build on their close to the game against the Stampeders. But I You guys know, if you've watched my content for any amount of time in the last couple of years, I am not high on Bo Levi Mitchell. I am not high on this Hamilton team. I think Saskatchewan is well ahead of Hamilton, and I think they spoil another home opener getting a victory here on Sunday. All right, that is going to do it for part 1 of Couch Potato Diary today. Part 2, we are going to be looking at WWE Clash at the Castle and the big boxing card that is happening this weekend, with some talk on the UFC controversies as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you are watching, make sure you subscribe and like. If you're listening, make sure you subscribe and leave a review. Follow me on social media. I'm at Primetime Klein, and I'll talk to all of you in a bit. I'm out.